Now, another really cool. Now, what Google's known for is obviously search. All right, it's a search engine, and it's going to search billions and billions of websites to find the results that you're looking for. And the way most people do a search is they simply type whatever it is that they're looking for, and it's going to pull up that information without having to do a whole lot of work. But Google does have a whole bunch of junk. It has a whole bunch of spam and sponsored links and other things that are going to show up in your search results also. And so the more specific you can be with your searching, the better you're going to get, and the better chance you're going to have at finding good results right off the bat. So, for example, let's say I was going to search for, there was a famous, it's a true story, famous person from the British Navy. Was the founder of the British Navy, actually. It was a man named John Paul Jones. So I was teaching fourth grade. And when I was teaching fourth grade, I had students do a report on famous colonists. So I had a whole list of colonists, and everyone goes through and they pick their own person, and then they do some research and they're writing their report. And so one of those famous colonists was a man named John Paul Jones. So if I typed in John Paul Jones and I do an image search in Google, what it's going to do, the way Google works, is it's going to look for the word John, the word Paul, and the word Jones anywhere it can find it. Now, it'll, chances are, bring the ones where all three of those names show up on the same page together first, but it's going to show any result that matches the word John, the word Paul, and the word Jones. So it could be a guy named Paul who lives at Jones Street in St. John, Minnesota, or something along those lines. But it's still got all three words on that page, so those things are going to show up. So when you do a search on John Paul Jones, and you are a fourth grade student, you learn and you see that, hey, you know what? There's a John Paul Jones who is a famous British colonist. And there's also a John Paul Jones that happens to be a musician, which might be a little bit more interesting to learn about than the John Paul Jones that is a famous colonist. And he is I believe, a guitar player in Led Zeppelin. So he's a pretty popular musician. And so he is going to show up quite a few times in my search results. So I can do a couple things to my searches to help me limit what it's going to find. And I highly recommend that you teach students how to do this, because if a student knows how to do this, they're going to be a lot faster and a lot better at searching, and they're going to find results quicker and get more accurate results quicker, and be better at avoiding the junk that comes through in Google. So it tells me right now there are 609 million results that it found with the name John, Paul, and Jones on them. Now, if I simply take something like quotation marks, what quotation marks do is this allows you to search for an exact phrase. So if I now just simply put John, Paul, Jones in quotation marks and do a search, it cuts it down to 4.5 million. So I literally cut out 600 million results by simply putting quotation marks around it. So what this is going to look for is this is going to look for the exact phrase, John Paul Jones. So it's looking for those three words right next to each other. Now, I can continue and add as many things as I want into the search bar. So I could put a plus sign, and I could add more words. So if I know he was a colonist, I could type in colonist, or I could type in British, or I could type in Navy, or other words that I know that will help filter that down to find information that I need. Or I can even do minus signs. So, for example, the John Paul Jones that shows up here as a musician, I could type in minus musician and hit return, and it will subtract results from my search. So it looks for John Paul Jones right next to each other and subtract any page that has the word musician on it. And this will hopefully remove a lot of the John Paul Jones, the musician, Led Zeppelin guitar player, artist that shows up in here. Now, there's also another John Paul Jones, who I believe was in The Bachelor. And again, if I'm a fourth grader, much more interesting than possibly than the British colonist. But again, I can continue here and say, okay, let's put plus Navy, because I know that he founded the British Navy. That's all I know about him. All right, and then hit return. And then now I have a much more filtered list. I'm down to less than 1 million list of results that are going to go through that I can search from. So using certain things in your search terms, you can get a much more specific search. This is called Boolean search terms, to be able to find a much more limited view. Now, I could also use words like and or, but I like personally the plus and minus signs. I find it easier to go through and do that. Now, another way to do the same thing is if I tap on settings here and I go to advanced search. So advanced search gives me these same type of things where I could look for an exact phrase. I can make sure it includes this word. It doesn't include this word. Again, it does the exact same thing here, but it'll tell me what words I'm using in order to do that. So in case, instead of having to go to this advanced search page every time, if I can learn some of these tricks, that's going to make me a little quicker. So let me show you another one. One of my favorite baseball players growing up was a man named Jose Canseco. He was my childhood idol. I loved the man. And he made some poor life decisions. And as many young boys who look up to a person as an idol, that idol probably let me down. So if I'm going to do a search for Jose Canseco, again, I can just throw some quotes around it. So I know that I have his information in here. And there are much different portions of his life that I might be searching for. So in his heyday, in the late 80s, he had a great career. Since then, he's had some unfortunate events that have happened because of that. That he got into some bad things. Anyway, I want to focus on the highlights of his career, not maybe the end of his career that I wasn't as popular with, or as things I don't want to promote. So one of the things I can do is I can actually put dates in a search. And so if I wanted to search for a specific date, I could put in just a specific date. Or I could actually put in a range of dates. So, if I typed in like 1985, and you use the 2 dots, ... So this is showing you that this is a range between one number and another. So if I did Jose Canseco 1985 ... 1992, it's going to focus on things that it found. Now, won't be things that have been posted during that time because internet didn't exist in its current form back then. But it will give me things that were from that time period. All right. So again, I now do my search, and it's going to give me articles and things that refer to that period of time that I was looking for, not necessarily the older versions of Jose Canseco. It's going to focus on the younger versions of Jose that I like to remember fondly.